that corn or that wheat or that rice or whatever, there's soybeans out of there and getting it in the truck and moving on. And it's go, go, go. Or they don't make money. So now all of a sudden someone says you got to air blow the combine? Or these poor guys that run these grain elevators in backscratch, Iowa, they're sitting there and here come all these trucks, and now you've got to ask the driver, is this a BT crop? Is that a conventional non-GMO crop?
Until recently, isolating crops was not an issue in the farm industry. No systems have been established to separate or track specific crops in transportation or storage. So GM crops have arbitrarily been included with non-GM varieties.
Eventually, the trucks were all given two kinds of placards to put into the windshield of the truck. GMO, non-GMO. And then some guy who probably didn't even know what GMO meant is supposed to direct these trucks. And it's pathetic. I mean, we're just not set up for it.
100 million acres and more planted last year. And the public has very little to say about it. I would say most Americans are not aware. The food they're eating is genetically engineered, and they're not aware that until perhaps they have a reaction to food and they can't figure it out.
One of the main criticisms of the biotech industry is the charge that profits have taken precedence over all other considerations, including safety. As the chemical companies buy the seed companies and merge with grain trade corporations, we see the rise of food monopolies. These companies have patents on their seed and aggressively protect those patents, as one Canadian canola farmer recently discovered.
He ruled that if I have a regular conventional canola seed or plant in my field, and it gets cross-pollinated by Monsanto's Roundup-ready canola plant from my neighbor or from whomever, my plant becomes Monsanto's property.
Well, Monsanto illegally came onto his land, took some samples of his crop, tested it, and said, guess what? Your canola contains our DNA, our genetic material from Roundup Ready, and you're not signed to use our product. You're infringing on our patent. We're suing you. And they've sued him. And his defense is, I never used it. It basically blew into my field, and I'm countersuing you for polluting my field.
I had been growing and developing canola for 53 years, and I had canola that was adaptable and resistant to some of the diseases in our area. I lost all that development because it got cross-pollinated, and their seed mixed in with mine, so it ruined all my research and development of my seed. I lost all those years of work.
Well, biotech companies are trying to patent life itself, to make life a basic commodity like anything else. Raises troubling philosophical questions about human freedom.
Essentially, Congress looked at this issue. In 1968, they were debating changes to the patent laws, and one was whether you can patent sexually reproducing plants. So in 1970, Congress said, we're not going to allow the patenting of plants. We're going to create something called the Plant Variety Protection Act. That's fine, but in 1985, in a case called Ex parte Hibbard, the Patent Office, on its own, ignored the will of Congress and allowed the patenting of plants. That was not what Congress set up to do, and the Patent Office had just frankly ignored it.
In reality, the whole thing is business, because the reason why they're genetically modified food is that we have patents on life. You know, they patent the tree, they patent the genetically modified agricultural product. As you know, they own not only the plant and the product, but also the seed. So they actually patent life. And we think that living matter should not be privatized. It should not be owned by anyone. It's owned by Mother Nature or God and all of us, you know.
Environmental, health, and philosophical questions remain unanswered while the transgenic food products have made their way to market. As the new foods move around the world, governments and nations have had to address the issues, often by the force of public opinion. Grazia Francescato and the Green Party movement throughout Europe oppose genetically modified organisms in food and have placed pressure on the governments in Europe demanding the labeling of GM products.
Many scientists say there is no risk But we have now many, many scientists who are also saying, let's adopt a precautionary principle because we don't know yet. And in Europe, especially after the mad cow disease, many public opinion is with us. Many people just do not want to eat genetically modified food.
I want to paint what's happening here, this front line in a country where we've had huge success with the genetic engineering campaign, in something of an international context, just so that we can get some perspective, and also so we can realize how important these little struggles that we're having in rural areas in England are to the rest of the world. In the United States, the Industry Association there say that they hope that within 5 to 10 years, 90 to 95% of all plant food will be genetically engineered. And they're well on the way to achieving their desired outcome.
I'm here because I'm a mother and a grandmother, and basically I want GMs out of the world, not just out of Britain, but out of the world.
Their power is an artifact of our acquiescence. It's only because we've been too much asleep, because we haven't done enough to stop them, that they've been able to get as far as they have. It's only because the whistle wasn't blown early enough. It's because the whistle hasn't been blown often enough that they've got as far as they've got. But now we can set them back. We can set them back by causing trouble, and trouble is the only guarantor of our liberties. There is no perfect political state out there. There is no utopia, no safe shore. A democratic government is only as good as the capacity of its citizens to challenge it.
The European Union, along with Japan, Australia, Russia, the Czech Republic, and South Korea, have all passed legislation that will require mandatory labeling of genetically modified foods.
It's an identity issue. Our cultural identity is very much linked to food. If you go to Italy, and I hope you do so, you will find out that wherever you go, in every region, there are many different kinds of foods that have been developed through the centuries. They are traditional food. And so they have a specific value. They not only have nutritional value, they have a cultural value. We are deeply rooted in our food, so to speak.
There is a greater resistance to GM foods in Europe than there is here, or has been in the United States. And I think the precipitating factor was that there were several food safety scares in Europe. So there was the mad cow disease, and then there was the dioxin contamination. And quite frankly, the governments there really just didn't handle it very well.
Food to them is a culture, and they're concerned with what they're eating. Too many people in North America feel that their food comes from a superstore. The only countries that will buy our canola right now are Mexico, the United States, and what's produced in Canada, and to a limited degree in Japan. So why grow it anymore if you cannot sell it? And that's what's happening in the United States with corn and soybeans. Billions of dollars of lost sales because people in the world don't want it.
These big multinationals, like Monsanto, for instance, they say we need them to, in order to solve the problem of famine in the third world. This is not true at all, because everybody knows that we already have enough food in the world as far as production is concerned. The problem is distribution of this food.
And we don't need giant multinational corporations who have no allegiance to any community, no allegiance to any country, except to control them. We don't need them to convert the genetic resources of the world, the seeds of the food, into monopoly patent intellectual property, as they call it.
When we look at what the biotech industry is telling us about genetically altered food, they say that we should accept these products in our food supply because genetic engineering is the best way to end hunger. Now, while it's true that hunger is a persistent and growing problem around the world, we have a lot of questions about this argument that genetic engineering is the way to resolve it.
As a direct result of widespread public protests, the European Union is currently developing comprehensive laws that will regulate GMOs.
The labeling is a very important part of this struggle, because everybody agrees, even multinationals have to agree, that at least you should have the right to choose. And in order to have the right to choose, I need to have a label that tells me whether or not I have genetically modified elements in the food I eat.
So